Okay, it looks like about everyone's in. So thank you so much for joining us. My name is Whitney White. I'm from Parent and Family Programs at the University of Cincinnati. Thank you so much for being here. If you're a student or a family member, welcome. We're so thrilled to have future Bearcats here, as well as family members who will be partnering with us over the next several years to help ensure your student success and that they have everything they need to be successful at UC. A little bit about our office. We support parents throughout the entire UC experience, from admission all the way to graduation and beyond. You can always reach out to us. We'll share our information at the end. So please let us know if we can ever help you or your student in any way. But today is all about accessibility resources. So I'm going to toss it over to Mike Southern, director of our Accessibility Resources Office on our Clifton campus. And he's going to share with you a little bit more about everything to do with how we support students with disabilities at UC, and also how you can get captioning for tonight's event. So I'll toss it over to you, Mike. Thanks so much for being here.
Absolutely, Whitney. Thanks to you and Diamond for setting this up so that we can share this stringent information with our parents. And hopefully we have a couple of students chiming in or listening in about what we do at the University of Cincinnati to ensure that our students, once they make the transition from high school to college, understand what that process looks like. We've tried to make it as seamless as possible and tried to allow individuals whom have a question or concern or are looking for what that next looks like for their student relative to access and accommodations, and to give them just a little bit of information so that they can have this in their toolkit as they're making decisions about either being future Bearcats or they're coming in the fall. You want to make sure that you understand what this looks like for students. I'm going to share some PowerPoints. My partner in crime, Mr. Moore, there with the College to Careers backdrop there. He's going to give some great information about a phenomenal partnership that we have with Opportunities for Hines with Disabilities and a College to Career program. So we're super excited. We have a lot of PowerPoints. Doug and I crafted a lot of stuff today. And so we're going to try to get through our PowerPoints and leave an opportunity at the end for some questions. But we're going to barrel through these PowerPoints and hopefully give you a little bit more information, along with giving you some emails to Doug and I so you can reach out to us, because we're still working remotely at the university, soon to be back. But we want to give you an opportunity to at least have emails post our coffee chat time with you this evening that you can reach out to us. So if you will just offer me just a moment to get to my screens here, and I'll start sharing in a moment. If you'll just give me just one moment. Okay. Let's see here. Does everyone see the slide? Just want to confirm that. Excellent. Thank you so very much for confirming that, Rebecca. I saw a thumbs up. I appreciate that. For those who would like access professional real-time captioning, you can go to this link and you'll have an opportunity to have captions for this event. We want to make this event as accessible as possible to a wide range of attendees. So if you could go to that link, and I'll give some time so that you can have that available. And we will have an opportunity at the end for questions. So we're going to go through it. If anyone has any questions, please, I would ask that you write those down, and we can hit each of those at the end of our presentation. A little information about us and where we're located. Obviously, University of Cincinnati. This is our campus location, located at 2618 Clifton Avenue. For those that are familiar with campus, we're in the same building as admissions, One Stop, financial aid, and other offices. So we're at University Pavilion there on Clifton. Tonight, our presentation is transitioning to post-secondary for students with disabilities. As I said before, we really hope to give a lot of information so that you and your student has some information, so that it'll give you a little bit more of information about what this looks like for students transitioning to post-secondary. This evening, you'll meet with me, of course, and then my partner in crime, as I mentioned before, Mr. Doug Moore with College to Career. But I'd like to start off with, what is our why? I read this amazing book this summer that talks about begin with why. And I, along with my team, we talked about this particular question. What is our why? Why do we do what we do within Accessibility Resources? And so this is our why. Accessibility Resources exist to promote an inclusive and welcoming environment for all persons with disabilities. Our intention is to engage in a conversation with our students, faculty, and campus partners, and working together, create an environment where equal access exists within all aspects of the Bearcat experience. The one thing I'd like for you to focus on within our why is the equal access. That's extremely important for our students transitioning from high school to post-secondary. So we really want to focus on that this evening. This evening, I'm going to talk about these differences between secondary and post-secondary as it relates to receiving services, the intake process, documentation, the laws, advocacy, and then some helpful tips. Now, I'm going to use the term disability services a little loosely. We, within our office, renamed our office several years ago to Accessibility Resources, again, to focus on that access piece. But some universities use disability services as a standard. So we're going to kind of use some of these interchangeably. But so we're going to say for this evening, you're going to see disability services, but you'll notice that we refer to our office as Accessibility Resources. So in the secondary environment, school districts are responsible for identifying students with disabilities, design special education instruction, and are providing and paying for accommodations. The focus is on creating student success. In the post-secondary environment, students are responsible for seeking disability-related services on campus from our office, Accessibility Resources, and requesting accommodations within their classes. The focus is providing equal access. Now, I don't want to give the impression that we are not concerned about student success, absolutely. But one thing that we want to ensure that whatever occurs within the Bearcat experience, as you saw in the previous slide, there is equal access within that opportunity for all our Bearcats. Success is definitely always a marker that we look toward, but creating equal access is definitely something that we focus on as well. Within the intake process within post-secondary, the student contacts Accessibility Resources and arranges for an intake appointment. Documentation, we're going to talk a bit more about that in a moment, should be presented to our office ahead of time to review and develop questions specific for that particular student. Students arrange to discuss a conversation. Students should be prepared to discuss strengths and challenges within that intake process, and students should be able to discuss their disability and how it affects or impacts them. That's so very important. I have been very fortunate that I've had an opportunity to speak with students and some of my friends in the high school areas. And when students are in their IEP meetings or 504 meetings, students are just figureheads in some cases, not across the board, but there's figureheads in those meetings, and they really don't have a voice relative to their accommodations or what is occurring. And so when they make the transition to post-secondary, the narrative flips and the student is in the driver's seat, if you will, and they are there to ensure that what they need is discussed between the accommodation coordinator and the student, but the student is definitely driving the accommodation process. Within documentation, secondary environment, school districts are responsible for providing trained experts to assess eligibility and plan education services. Experts include school psychologists, speech pathologists, school counselors, and others. Collectively, they develop and implement IEPs and 504 plans. In the post-secondary environment, students are responsible for providing disability documentation from a qualified professional whom can assess their specific disabilities. However, documentation is not the sole determiner if a student will receive services from Accessibility Resources. The student narrative or the voice is. That's extremely important in the post-secondary setting. You'll see that. That's something that is becoming commonplace across the board. Whether you're at the University of Cincinnati or some of our other institutions, the student now has the voice to determine what he or she or they may need within the post-secondary environment to ensure that they have, again, as I discussed earlier, equal access. The student voice is so very important. What does this mean? Students are now in control of their accommodations and they have a voice. Parents, grandparents, guardians, now is the time to allow the student to shine and take ownership of their education. I cannot tell you how many times I've had meetings with students, and as we're beginning the intake, the mom or dad or grandparent or guardian, they chime in and they want to, offer some information for us. And while I appreciate that the parents and grandparents have been always in the conversations with the IEP team or 504 team. We want them to take a step back and allow the student, he or she, an opportunity to discuss how their disability has impacted them and what does that mean. We recognize in some cases that's very different for a large number of students. We want to make sure that they are in the driver's seat and they can help us understand what that means for each of them. So again, students have the voice as it relates to the accommodations. Laws versus IDEA and the ADA. In the secondary environment, the student has a legal entitlement to an education regardless of disability. Education offered in the least restrictive environment. Schools ensure a free and appropriate public education, and the school has to do everything it can to help the student succeed. In the post-secondary environment, Section 504, the student has a civil right to have access to educational programs and services. And again, institutions are obligated to provide access and the opportunity programs and services. Institutions have no obligation to guarantee an education. We have to ensure that college is voluntary. Institutions are not obligated to ensure that the individual student succeeds. Okay, we're going to move on. Advocacy. In the secondary environment, in some cases, students learn of their disability and the importance of self-advocacy. The parents act as strong advocates for their student. In some cases, the students don't have a voice. In the post-secondary environment, students must identify and be able to describe their disability, identify strengths and weaknesses, identify accommodations needed, and become a competent self-advocate. Students are considered adults, and privacy is required by FERPA. Some helpful tips that I'll offer. High school students' responsibility and how can your high school make the transition easier for you? High school students, what can you do now that you will make the transition easier for you? Learn how your disability impacts your ability in a particular course or subject. Become comfortable talking about your disability. Learn that asking for help is a strength, not a weakness. So many of our students that we engage often come with the ideal or the impression that their disabilities is a weakness. And we want to change that narrative, change that thought process and say, there may be some areas that you may struggle, but we can help using the resources on campus to help you, again, be successful, but have equal access. We suggest that students approach their teachers, special education personnel, if accommodations are not working. Utilize accommodations at least once so you'll know what works and what doesn't work for you. With help of your guidance counselor or teacher, research colleges that will help provide you the services that you need. That's the very reason why we're on this call this evening, so that we can share with you what the services will look like at the University of Cincinnati. And then advocate for yourself. How your high school can make the transition easy for you. Before transitioning to post-secondary, ask your special education teacher, intervention specialist, if your documentation offers insight into how your disability impacts you within the academic environment. If so, can you, the student, explain how it does? As mentioned earlier, in a large number of IEP meetings, 504 meetings, the students, some cases don't even know what their diagnosis may be or what accommodations they receive. What I've heard from many students is, I just go to the resource room. We want to change that narrative. We want you to understand what the nature of your disability and then what accommodations you receive. Because when you sit in the seat with the accommodation coordinator, he or she is going to ask you the question, how does your disability impact you? And then you want to work with your support team, your support person, to help identify what your strengths and weaknesses are. Now, at the University of Cincinnati, this is our registration. Students who are interested in services must complete an online application for services, which will allow the student to upload documentation of disability, as well as provide a narrative to how their disability impacts them within the academic setting. Documentation can include 504 plans, IEPs, psychological evaluations, physician's notes, other documents from qualified professionals. But again, within the post-secondary environment now, documentation is a secondary tool used. The student narrative is the most important piece as we have that intake process with students. And we have a documentation good to go checker on our website. So students can look at that and say, does this meet the guidelines? But no student is going to be denied the opportunity to connect with one of our accommodation coordinators and or our staff if their documentation doesn't meet some predetermined guideline. Again, the student narrative is the mark that we're looking for. After submitting an application, a follow-up meeting with an accommodation coordinator will occur so that reasonable accommodations can be determined. The student self-report. This is one of the biggest questions that we ask within our student self-report. How does your disability impact you in the academic setting? In taking tests, class attendance, taking notes, understanding materials, speaking, comprehension, and other. As a future college student, you should be able to answer this question. Your response will allow our accommodation coordinators to better understand your needs and determine the most appropriate accommodations for you. This, while it may seem like an easy question, some students don't know, the answer to this because they've never been asked the question, and or they do know, but they don't know how to formalize that into a statement. And so we want to help our students understand that. But all of this is on the online application for services, so students can take as much time as he or she or they may need to offer a response to this particular question. So that's extremely important for us. These are some of our accommodations available for students. This is not the exhaustive list, but it's a small sample. We have note takers. We have a scribe for students who may have an injury to an arm or a physical condition that may prohibit them from taking notes. Extended time on test, alternative testing, a quiet room for tests, alternative textbooks. We have books in digital format, sign language interpreters, readers for exams, communication access, real-time writer or CART, use of a calculator or computer, assistive technology, and other specific to students' disability-related needs. All accommodations are assigned on a case-by-case basis. I may have 15 students with a similar diagnosis, but their accommodations are going to be very, very different because their narrative of how their disability impacts them is very different. So the accommodations will be very, very different and varied, but most importantly is that the student, he or she, or they need the accommodations that are going to help lessen the impact of that disability within the academic setting. We also offer, and this is extremely important for our office, is to ensure that students have an opportunity to engage with some of our campus partners. In this case, our Counseling and Psychological Services, or CAPS office. And then our CAPS office provides mental health counseling to the UC student body and offers the following support services: crisis emergent services, group services, individual counseling, alcohol and drug change recovery services, power-based violence support services, and suicide prevention. When the university started going on remote learning, and this is seen across the board at campus across the United States, a large amount of students engaged our mental health services, including our CAPS office, because it's very challenging to now go from an in-person learning to remote learning, and how that impacts not necessarily students with mental health diagnoses, but the entire student body. And so we want to ensure that all of our students had an opportunity to engage with the mental health personnel so that he or she or they can get the services that they need. Right now, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Mr. Doug Moore, to talk about our College to Career program. Doug, just let me know when you'd like for me to advance your slides.
All right. Hello. I'm Doug, like we talked about. First of all, I'm lucky to be part of this coffee chat with Mike Southern and with UC this evening. And I work for a state agency that's lucky to be in partnership with the University of Cincinnati in general. So I don't work for UC, but I work for a separate organization called Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities. That's who we are. What we do is we call it vocational rehabilitation, as it says here on the slide. If a person wants to work but they're having trouble because of their disability, they may qualify for vocational rehabilitation. And so that is vocational rehabilitation, provides individuals with disabilities beginning at age 14. We provide services and supports necessary to help them attain and maintain employment. So there's lots of different pathways to get to employment, and one of those pathways is through college. So the disabilities that we might work with include physical, intellectual, mental health, or sensory. And our services are customized to each individual. So OOD, this larger state organization, has programs that are designed to best serve certain groups of individuals. So we have a program for individuals who are blind and visually impaired. We have a program for individuals who are in high school. We have a program for individuals of all ages who are deaf and hard of hearing. And so I represent a new partnership or a new program called College to Careers. And that's basically a partnership between Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities and various colleges. I think we're ready to switch over to the next slide. And while he does that, so College to Careers, as the slide says, that's the name of the program. We are here to ensure that students with disabilities have the support they need to earn their degree, get their credential, earn higher wages, meet the demands of tomorrow's labor market. So our organization, OOD, partnered with 15 colleges and universities across Ohio, and one of which is the University of Cincinnati. And we're ready to go to the next slide. The idea is that a counselor like myself, a college to career counselor, I will exist and live at each campus. Now, COVID kind of made things a little difficult with that. But when things start looking more ordinary, I will be in the same on campus at the main UC campus, but I have partners and coworkers that are also stationed at the University of Cincinnati Blue Ash and the University of Cincinnati Claremont College. So we're right there, either part of the Disability Services Department, or as they call it in Mike's shop, the Accessibility Resources. So I literally have a spot there. And so we can help students navigate the supports that are available on campus. We have extra resources, OOD does, where we can move on to the next slide, where we can basically use money and funding that we have to purchase things that a college student might need. So we batch this into a few categories. I'll talk through these and then I'll get out of your way. So some students, some college students that we are working with may be in college, but they might not know exactly, and that's what that's going to, how that's going to translate to a job down the road. And so we can kind of take a step backward or a sidestep and help the student explore what their vocational skills are, what their interests are, what their aptitudes are, and maybe do some additional, pay for some additional testing or exploration to determine what career might make sense down the road. So I know I'm for example, I'm a college degree studying psychology, but what kind of jobs might be available or make sense for me when I'm finished with that program? So we might be able to do some exploration and see what is in a, what job opportunities exist within certain majors. Something else is some of our participants, some of our students, some, not all, might be receiving an income from the government. It's usually Social Security disability. Again, some but not all do. And they might, when they're starting to think about work, getting through college, getting a job during the summertime or whatever, they might start thinking, well, how is that, when I earn money, how is that going to change the monthly income that I get from Social Security, or will that impact my benefits like Medicaid and Medicare? So we can help pay for something that we call a benefits analysis or a benefits planning to kind of investigate and spell out exactly what's going to happen to the students' benefit, Social Security benefit, once they start earning income. So we can help with that vocational planning category. Another way that OOD can help through its College to Careers program is that we are able to purchase and pay for things that we call assistive technology. So it might mean that a person with a certain condition or disability might need a piece of technology that will help them overcome something that is an obstacle. For instance, a person who is without sight, who's blind, might benefit from devices that translate and turn everything from the written word into the spoken word. So if they, instead of seeing what's on the screen, they can hear what's going on the screen. And so there's many little pieces of what's called assistive technology. Those things cost money. Insurance oftentimes doesn't pay for it. So it is possible that OOD might be able to pay for a piece of assistive technology that would help someone with a disability get through schooling, get through training, and into a career. Some other examples that we have listed here is hearing aids or ergonomic equipment for someone who needs a different setup. I think I'm ready to go to the next slide. So we can help with the actual job search. So college students, sometimes they are in mandatory internship programs that are built into the program. Sometimes college students may have the summer off and they may want to get some work experience during the summer. Is going to be looking for a permanent career as they wrap up their schooling. So OOD can help with that. And how we help are some of these bullet points on the right-hand side. We can help individuals develop and improve resumes. We can help with interviewing skills so that once a person gets the chance to have a job interview, that they do as well as possible. And we can do that through what we call mock interviews, which basically are practice interviews just to try to get things correct. We also, College to Careers also offers virtual hiring events where there are companies that are interested in students for summer employment or for permanent employment or for even internships that are interested in interviewing students that are with our program. So basically our goal is to connect our participants with employer partners that we have out there. And then I think the next slide, and then I'm about finished, is another thing that we help with, another way that we can help students with disabilities is to really basically, we call it this disability disclosure. Do, whether, when, or how. Should we bring up a disability to a place that I'm going to be working? If I should, when, and if I should, how should I? And so we can work with the students to go through that thought process of about whether or not and how to disclose that a person has some sort of impairment or condition which impacts employment. And another final way that we can help support individuals get from their college into their permanent employment is by helping them once they're on a job. Some of our participants might need a little bit extra assistance once they start a job to become adjusted to the world of work. And so we can have professionals that we sometimes call job coaches to talk with them off the clock about their job and how things are going. And if any issues come up that have to do with disability and employment, well, that job coach can talk with them and give them advice and suggestions and talk through and role play scenarios about how they might fare better in retaining their job. So this College to Careers program is the program that I represent. It's a great fun partnership with both the Office of Disability or Accessibility Resources and the Career Services at University of Cincinnati. And I'm just delighted to be part of the program. And I just told you a little bit about, more about that. And if I can answer any questions, I'd be glad to. But I'm gonna just turn it back over to you, Michael.
Great. Doug, thank you so very much for this information. I'm going to go to your next slide, I believe I'm correct here. There we go. This is just some contact information for Doug. So that way I'll leave it on the screen for a moment so you can write some of these things down. But I just want to say I am so very proud to be able to have Doug in our office and working with our Accessibility Resources team. When we get back together and have the opportunity for students to engage our offices for accessibility resources, we definitely, as part of our intake process, share with them about our college to career program. One of the things that some of you may know, those that do not know, is that the University of Cincinnati is big on cooperative exploration and giving students an opportunity to have some real world work experience as he or she or they are completing their degree. There are several programs, colleges, excuse me, on our campus, such as the College of Engineering, College of Business, who have, as part of the curriculum, a requirement for the student to engage in work. And so for students who utilize accessibility resources, we want to ensure that students whom are in these college programs who may need some additional support, as Doug was mentioning, relative to disability and or an accommodation, that we can partner with those colleges and partner with our career services to ensure that that student, he, she, or they receives the necessary accommodations that they may need within that experience. But we also want to share with those students who do not have that as part of their academic program to avail themselves of the college to career program, because the end goal is to complete your education and then find a job, wherever that may be. And we recognize that that some of our students who may need that little extra something to get to that place, and that's where the college to career program comes in, and our partnership with OOD. And we've been a part of this partnership for, I would say now, close to 3 or 4 years. Started off very small, and now we have expanded, and to have a dedicated college to career counselor at the University of Cincinnati. As Doug mentioned earlier, there are only 15 colleges who actually have an embedded college to career counselor within their accessibility resources / disability services programs in the state. And there are definitely more than 15 colleges in the state of Ohio. So we're very fortunate to have Doug in-house with our office, providing that one-on-one direct services to students so that he or she, they can get this rich information about the world of work. And it doesn't mean that you have to be a junior or a senior to participate in college to career. Absolutely not. As an incoming freshman, you're more than happy to meet with Doug and ask the students to engage with Doug so that they can have an opportunity to learn a little bit more about the college to career program. So we're so excited to have Doug there in the offices. Now we're going to have an opportunity. We kind of went through and a lot of these very quickly. I talk fast, Doug talks fast, but we want to give an opportunity for questions. Does anyone have any questions for myself and or Doug?
Mike, if it's okay with you, we did get some folks who, when they asked us questions about tonight's event, they sent in some questions.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to kick us off with that, and then we'll turn it back to the group to ask questions.
Excellent.
And some of these you've already touched on, but I always think if we get this question more than once, it's never a bad thing to answer it twice.
Absolutely.
Or make sure people know what they need to do. So one thing is, you've already talked about how the process is very different than high school. What would you say the family member's role should be at this point? And what's the best way they can support their student as they come into college? And, you know, if you've seen sort of families go through this experience in different ways, what works really well?
That's an excellent question. I'm not sure if the individual who posed that question is listening, but that's a phenomenal question. What I would offer to the family is to kind of change their thinking. You know, earlier I mentioned that parents, students, guardians have always kind of been in the driver's seat of ensuring that the student, he or she, receives services while they're in high school. And I've had personal experiences where parents come to our office and they have a binder and they're ready to fight and everything for services. And we're like, that is not the narrative here. You know, our focus is on the student. what he or she needs. And the look on the student's face is like, I have a voice in this. And the answer to that is absolutely. And so, and parents sometimes are like relieved, like, wow, I don't have to fight for all these accommodations and services. And so what I would offer to that question is for the parents and the students, is to do some of that training, as I talked about earlier, talking about if there are some things listed within the student's documentation, can the student, he or she or they themselves, answer that question? And I'm going to kind of go back a little bit, if that's okay. Oh, pardon me. I'm going to go down. If you guys can still see my screen here, I'm sure you can, but I'm going to focus on this question here. How does your disability impact you within the academic setting? If the student can answer this question, then that's part of it right there. How does your disability impact you within the academic setting? Because again, a lot of times students don't know. They've never been asked that question. So I would say, as the students and parents are getting ready for this transition, is prep the students for this question that they're going to be asked within our online application for services, but also by the accommodation coordinator. The focus is, again, is giving that student, he or she, the opportunity to develop these self-advocacy skills so that when they, not only in accessibility resources, but other places on campus, they are going to be their own, and they will always be their own strongest self-advocate. So we want to incorporate some of that self-independence early on in the process. So right now, as you have the summer or other, use this as a template for students as it relates to disability-related services, is how does your disability impact you in the academic setting, and can you answer that question? And again, from this question, the accommodation conversation will flourish. We call that the interactive process or interactive engagement with students, so that they can take true ownership of their accommodations.
Thanks, Mike. Another one is if the family member thinks that their student might be struggling, regardless of whether they have accommodations in place or not, or whatever they might need, should they contact you, your office, if they have concerns? How should they handle that kind of situation?
Absolutely. We get that a lot when students or parents are making this leap, and they may not know, they may think something's going on. What we would say is still connect with our office, and we'll have a conversation with the student, and then engage in that interactive process, the interactive dialogue. Again, while we want to have that engagement, there may be some things that the accommodation coordinators, he or she, may pick up in a conversation that may give us a little bit of information to say, maybe there is something that exists relative to disability that we may be able to offer some temporary accommodations on to help support that student. And then to give that student the opportunity to avail themselves of other services available on campus if they need that support, such as our Learning Commons on campus, which offers academic coaching, tutoring for students. Mentioned earlier that our counseling and psychological services, if that's needed. Doug mentioned our career services with Ms. Ellie Bridges. She is part of our team that helps support students. And so even if they are unsure, reach out and we can share with them the wealth of resources that the university offers to help support the student.
All right, and sort of a related question to that, does my student need to sign a waiver or release to allow me to speak to accessibility resources?
That is a phenomenal question. Earlier, and I'll see if I can find it here, earlier we talked about this thing called FERPA, privacy required by FERPA. Now, the one thing that parents and guardians, the one thing you'll hear about as you're making the transition, FERPA, and it stands for Family Educational Rights Privacy Act. And what that means is that when the student, he or she transitioned to post-secondary, their rights shift to the student, whether you're 14 or you're 44, if you will. Students' rights are protected. But there is an opportunity for parents and students to have a conversation, an internal conversation of what the student, he or she, would want parents, guardians, or other to have access to. Now, from the university perspective, there is an opportunity for students to give parents, guardians access to their student bill, grades, and other. And that's on the registrar's webpage. And maybe if we have time, I can share that. And I'd also like to maybe try to share our webpage, because there's some rich information that we just got uploaded if we have time. But for our office, We are working right now, it'll be ready by the fall, an additional form that would allow a student to make the determination if they want to have parents or guardians connect with our accommodation coordinators to ask questions. I will share with you, even with the student signing that consent form, accommodation coordinators' paramount responsibility is to provide advocacy and support for the student, but building a relationship with your student, developing trust, that's paramount. And there have been several conversations I've had that students have just very simply sent an email. I give, Whitney White the opportunity to talk to Mike Southern, and so I'll have a conversation with the student. The student may share some things with me that may be personal or other, and the mom or dad or other, they don't need to know that. It's paramount for us to developing relationship and building trust with that student. And we want to ensure that when the student walks out of our office, that they definitely feel that the services that we offer are going to help support them, again, as a student at the University of Cincinnati, for that success piece, of course, equal access without question, but we want to help develop a relationship where trust exists. And our mantra is, you can come in our office and receive our services. That's very easy to do, but we want you to feel comfortable in coming back and develop that relationship with our accommodation coordinators and our team, so that you know that we are vested in your Bearcat experience in multiple ways. And so FERPA does exist, but we definitely want to ensure that the students, he or she, or they feel comfortable in coming back and engaging with our office.
All right, so those are the questions we had in advance. I do want to allow folks to ask questions, but I would share a reminder with folks, please don't share private information about your student or your family, or too personal of a situation here. We always encourage you to reach out to accessibility resources directly or to our office. Mike just put his email up there. If you have something really specific that you want to ask, you're more than welcome anytime to email Mike or Doug or our office as well. Our email is families@uc.edu. And if you're not quite sure who you need to talk to about something, we can always get you pointed in the right direction. And often we have that information. We can answer it right away. Towards the end, I'll put up our contact information as well. But if you do have a question, you're welcome to go ahead and ask.
This is Tina Kelly.
Hi, Tina.
I was just wondering, the Ohio College to Career, is that applicable for out-of-state students too, or only people that are in-state students?
Great question. Throw that one over to Doug.
There, I was just trying to find the button. I was trying to find the button to unmute myself, and I was also trying to build up the suspense. I thought that would be very helpful. Yeah, good thinking. We're a state agency, but if a student is present in the state of Ohio, if a person is present in the state of Ohio, that's really what's important. So yes, for students that are out of state, if they are here going to the University of Cincinnati, then they are eligible for our services, even though they're not, technically a resident of the state of Ohio.
Thanks, Doug. Let's go to Marty Garcia.
Okay, my question has to do with the time frame. Is there like a certain time that they have to fill out this the online application for services? Is it due by a certain date, or can they, I can picture a kid going in and thinking, I don't need it, and then later saying, oh yeah, I need it. That's
a great question, Marty. It's a phenomenal question. I'll start with some information that's currently on our webpage for incoming freshmen, meaning starting, August. We're starting to accept those at the end of May. About May 24th to be specific. We want to kind of put spring semester to bed, and then those students can begin submitting those applications. However, students can register once you are a University of Cincinnati Bearcat. You can register on day 1 or day 3001. Okay. So it really doesn't matter for us, but we want to ensure that students have that opportunity. So once you are a UC Bearcat, you can register. I've had students register the week before finals. If that's, that's fine. That's not ideal. That's not ideal, this obviously, because we want to ensure the student has an opportunity for those services throughout, but you aren't precluded from registering. But what I will say to that, Marty, that's a phenomenal question, is that we have so many students who register with our office much later in their college experience, and they'll say, oh man, I really, really wish I would have done this years and years ago. I was so fearful that I was going to walk in and folks were going to care that I walk into quote unquote the disability services office. Part of the reasoning why we changed our name. And what I've learned over these last couple of years, students don't necessarily care about that anymore. The tide has changed. I mean, students are very open and sharing about their particular diagnoses, or ADD or ADHD students. That's just pretty much old hat. If you want to shock students now, tell them you're from like Mars or Saturn or something. You aren't going to shock students in that way, or your colleagues or your peers anymore. And so, but we try to encourage students, register as early as you feel comfortable. That's important, of course. But we have so many students who decide to wait and register much later in their college experience for quote unquote a fear, or that's going to somehow impact their social relationships or networks or other. And I can tell you now, we have students in medical school, law school, who receive services through our office. So you can be an incoming freshman and go to med school and then law school and have accommodations throughout that experience. So students can register at any time.
Thanks, Mike. Let's go to Nikisha Brooks.
Hi, thank you for providing this information to us. It's been very helpful. I haven't heard anything regarding housing accommodations, and I was just wondering how that works, because I know that would be important to my family.
Absolutely, absolutely. Whitney, would it be possible if I were to stop sharing this and pull up our webpage? Would that be possible?
Yes, I can do it for you if you want to start chatting, and then I'll share your site.
Okay, no, absolutely. If you could, pull that up. For students who need accommodated housing, we have a link on our webpage that once Whitney pulls that up, I'll share that with you. For students who need that support within the residential community to have those accommodations provided. We work very closely with our colleagues and friends within housing so that they can get the necessarily support they need within the residential community. We are, as you see on the page there, Whitney pulled it up, we're starting to accept those applications the week of May 3rd, so that will be next week. And Whitney, if you were to scroll down a little bit on that page, you'll see some information on how we partner with housing to ensure that these students get the necessary accommodations that they need. Whereby, as you see there, students who wish to request housing accommodations will follow that process. And there's a link as well as an application that the student will submit so that we can have that information, understand the nature of the student's disability, and then give a student, again, the opportunity to include a narrative of how their disability impact them within the residential community, and then give them an opportunity to have support within the residential areas. Whitney, if you could do one thing for me, if you go into the student resources link there on the top left, if you could click that and then hit registration. And then I want to share a new piece that we just added. If you go to the registration FAQs, there, if you kind of scroll up, okay, registration, yeah. These are some FAQs we have for students. Students typically ask for us, and I didn't want to go through all of these. I'll tell you about, I wanted to at least share some common questions that we get from students. How to register for services? What's an intake or registration meeting? What's an accommodation coordinator? When should I register for services? What accommodations should I request? And Whitney, if you scroll down on that page a little bit, we also have FAQs for parents. Should I be a part of the registration meeting? Can I come with my student to the registration meeting? I've always been a part of IEP 504. Can I register my student for services? What information do I have access to when my student registers? That talks about that FERPA piece again. So these are some questions that you can avail yourself of. And what I will do is that when we go back to my page, I will share with you again, if you didn't get an opportunity to include our write down our webpage, but all this information is within our Accessibility Resources webpage relative to housing, students who may need an assistance animal who make a request in that regard, but all of that information is on our webpage, excuse me. But this is something that we recently completed that hits some of these most common, as you mentioned earlier. If 3 or 4 persons ask, it means that we have some like-minded folks that are thinking the same thing. So we want to make sure that we have this information available. But if there is a question that you do not see answered on our page, again, I would ask you to email me directly, and I'll answer those questions for you. And also for your student, if there are some things that the student, perhaps he or she didn't want to, that may be listening this evening, they didn't want to ask, that's absolutely fine. We totally get that. Now that we're working remotely, we want to ensure that our students have an opportunity to speak to a member of our team. Thank you very much, Whitney, for sharing that in a private setting. And when intakes occur, that can occur over the phone. That can occur in a video platform, as we're doing right now. But we want to meet the student where he or she or they may feel comfortable or most comfortable. Some students are like, I don't want to do a video chat. A phone call is fine, and that's okay. But our intakes can occur, as well as engaging with a parent or student can occur in multiple ways.
All right, we'll go to Christina Guggenberger next with questions.
Hi there. I just had a quick question about if there were any cost or fees associated with any of the accommodations.
That's a great question, Christina. Absolutely not. The services that we offer within Accessibility Resources are free, as well as the College to Career. It's part of the UC Bearcat experience. Our services are absolutely 100% free.
All right. While other folks are thinking about if they have a question, I wanted to briefly put up our contact information as well. As I mentioned before, we serve families year-round on just about any topic. We always say, unless it's an emergency, call us, email us, and we can help. By all means, if you have accessibility-related questions, absolutely contact Mike. He is the expert and the person you're going to want to talk to. For families, if you ever have a question, you can reach out to us at families@uc.edu. And I would assume most of you are already following us on Facebook or in the family portal, and that's likely how you found your way here tonight. But you can also check out our website for all kinds of resources for students. So I wanted to turn it back. Yes, okay, to Wanda Thacker, you're up.
I was unmuted. I'm sorry. I was wondering how long is, once we start the process of my child wanting the accommodations, like the beginning of the process to the end, how long is that process?
That's a great question. Traditionally, when a student submits their online application for services, our accommodation coordinator staff, we have about a 5 to 7 day window to review, 5 to 7 day window to review that documentation, that information, that student submission, and then get in contact with the student, and then work to determine a time that the student, he, she, or they will be available to meet via phone or video chat or other. So the process is relatively quick. Now, for students who will be incoming freshmen, we know that we'll be doing some intakes over the summer, as we call them, a registration over the summer. We traditionally, once a student has an intake, we develop a document called an accommodation form, and that was one of those FAQs that you'll see there. And the accommodation form, that is the official notification from our office, and we give that to the student so that he or she can give that to their faculty partner. And then the faculty member is aware of accommodations only. We do not disclose disability diagnoses or other to faculty. That information is held confidential within Accessibility Resources. I want to make that clear. And the student then will give that to their faculty partner via email. For incoming freshmen, we'll still conduct an intake, but we're not going to give them an accommodation form until the beginning of the academic year, because it'll get lost in a sea of emails. So we hold those. But traditionally, once the student registers and they have determined accommodations in concert with their accommodation coordinator, they get an accommodation form that day. So it's really quick. It's same day. If there is some things that the accommodation coordinator, he or she may need to reach out to other members of our team to secure, such as either interpreting services or other, and may take a little bit longer. But the accommodation form that the student receives is pretty much given same day. Does that answer your question, Tawanda?
I'm sorry. Yes, it does. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right, great. Thank you.
All right, well, it looks like we have about all the questions answered and we're about out of time for our hour. Doug and Mike, I just want to thank you so much for being here tonight and for offering this information for our incoming students and families. And as a reminder, if anyone has any questions at all, please don't hesitate to reach out to Mike or our office. Accessibility resources, that looks like a little bit of a complicated URL up there, but the easiest thing to do is just type into Google UC accessibility resources and it comes right up and you can find that site. Same thing with UC families. So we hope that we will get a chance to get to know all of you soon and your families as well. And we look forward to the upcoming year as Bearcats and Bearcat families. So thank you so much for joining us and have a great evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.